Hey guys, welcome on in to today's video where we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Going to be doing a 3-horse race for the presidential election in 2020 instead of just a 2-horse race, of course. This is probably never going to be something that would happen in real life. If Bernie Sanders wanted to run, he'd probably go through the Democratic primary again like he did back in 2016. But just for a hypothetical scenario, Bernie Sanders running as a third-party independent, how the Electoral College might play itself when you have Joe Biden, then the incumbent Republican Trump on that side, and how the states might go in this scenario if they have to pick between 3 people instead of just 2 candidates, which is what it typically is. So I had this suggestion from one of my commenters. Their name was Balthazar228. So thanks for bringing up this particular scenario. It kind of piqued my interest. I wanted to make a video to see how this might play itself out. So thanks for that. Starting here, going to be going and giving Joe Biden the states that I think he would have the best shot at picking up. And right before I do that, you can see on the far right-hand side of the screen, I brought up a little bit of data, and that's the Gallup polls from every single month over the past couple of years that show percentage of Americans that identify as either Republicans, Independent, or Democrats. The most recent poll has 26% as Republicans, 43% as Independents, 29% as Democrats. Of course, Trump going to be getting the large bulk of that Republican vote, and then the Democratic vote probably splitting between Sanders and Biden. Maybe Biden gets about 60% of that Democratic vote, and then the Independents is where Bernie Sanders can do really well with that slice of the country, which is quite a bit larger than either the Republican or identify as Democrat groups at 43% there. If Bernie Sanders can get about 50% of that vote or so, and then also get half of the Democratic vote, I feel like he's going to be considerably outperforming Biden in a lot of these states that typically go to Democrats. So starting off here, Biden, the states I think he would have the best shot at winning would be a state like Illinois, where Barack Obama was a senator from there. I think Obama would really put his thumb on the scale, do a lot of campaigning, really turn out a lot of vote there for Biden in a state like Illinois. I also think Biden could get a lot of that Chicago-based vote, which is so important in a state like Illinois. And then I also tried to think of other parts of the country where Joe Biden could outperform Bernie Sanders, and I felt like that would be states that are typically Democratic in presidential elections and ones that have a bit more of an establishment Democrat vote, maybe ones where Bernie Sanders didn't perform quite as well in back during the 2016 primary against Hillary Clinton. Those were states like New York, and they're basically in this same pocket of the country, kind of the lower northeast and the east, and then also going down to states like New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, District of Columbia, as well as Virginia. So out of all the states, these were the ones that I could make the best case for Joe Biden, a bit more of that establishment Democrat vote, and also getting the Barack Obama boost out there in the state of Illinois. So now we're going to move on and give states that I think Donald Trump would be able to pick up. These are going to be states where he generally did really well in back during the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton, and ones where, you know, Biden and Bernie, maybe if it was just a head-to-head against Trump, they could keep things more competitive. But the fact that those two would probably split more of their vote than Trump's vote, he would probably go ahead and pick up a lot of these states. So starting off here with Idaho, also Alaska, and then Utah, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, everything except the 2nd Congressional District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. Also, North Carolina, a very competitive purple-type state in a presidential election, but again, I feel like Trump isn't going to have as much of his vote split off as compared to Biden and Bernie, so he probably picks up North Carolina. And I'm also going to say that that's probably going to be the case as well in states like Florida, as well as Ohio possibly, and then Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, that Mike Pence factor, and then also Missouri. I feel like Missouri could be extremely an interesting result, but again, Trump did really well there in 2016, and if it was just him against Biden or against Bernie Sanders, I could see that Trump losing the state possibly, but with those guys, again, splitting that vote, also giving Trump Missouri, and then Texas. And then we're also going to have the same kind of argument for why we have Trump winning Ohio, Florida, Missouri, those kind of states, also going to give him Arizona in that sense as well, with Biden and Bernie splitting more of their vote as well in that state, with Trump able to get just enough to go on to win a state like Arizona. So now we're going to move on to states that I think Bernie Sanders can do really well in. So starting off with the left coast as well as Hawaii, some of the more progressive areas of the United States. And Bernie has tremendous name recognition now, especially out in these areas compared to what he had even back in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders doing pretty well in some of these states. And then also Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico. These are 3 states that are continuing to have their demographic shift, and they're becoming more and more progressive and democratic. And then going up to the Northeast, I kind of think it's a no-brainer that Bernie Sanders would do extremely well up here. He's very well known in this part of the country. He's the independent senator from the state of Vermont. So we're having Bernie Sanders win Vermont, New Hampshire, all of Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and then the Midwest. This is a part of the country where I had probably my hardest time deciding on who would win these particular areas. If Sanders and Biden would split enough of the vote in these particular spots where Trump would be able to get over the line. But I think at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders is able to get a lot of that Donald Trump vote that typically votes Democrat but went Trump's way because of his populist message, and they just didn't have those feelings for Hillary Clinton that they would have for somebody like a Bernie Sanders in that instance. And Bernie also doing really well in a lot of these states back during the 2016 primary, especially the ones that had open elections. So starting off here with Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and then Iowa. That's another one of those states that can be very competitive in presidential elections. But again, I feel like Sanders does very well. There's a lot of love for him in the state of Iowa. Also, Sanders does really well in states that have higher percent of white populations. We saw that back during the 2016 primaries with him, and he can just get a lot of that vote that went for Trump because they didn't want to vote for somebody like a Hillary Clinton, and Sanders can recapture that kind of vote in these particular states. So at the end of the day, we have 92 electoral votes for Biden, 193 for Bernie Sanders, and then 252 for Donald Trump. And this is why I just don't see Bernie Sanders ever running as a third-party independent when you have a Democrat that he would have to run against as well as a Republican, because he would just split too much of that vote with the Democrat to probably have a chance to go on to pick up 270 electoral votes. So it just wouldn't be a great situation for him to run in that scenario. And that's why he ran in the Democratic primary in 2016 instead of just being an independent. Also forgot about the Nebraska 2nd Congressional District. Also had that one going over to Bernie Sanders. It's the perfect kind of district for him to do well in. So again, was talking about Bernie Sanders and why he wouldn't run as a third-party independent in this scenario. And then you have Trump getting the most of the Electoral College votes, but none of the candidates getting to 270. So we scrap the Electoral College at this point, and we would move on to each state getting one vote, and that one vote is decided on the members of Congress from those particular states. So if you're from Montana, for instance, you just have one congressman. They would make the vote. If you're from California, you'd have 53 congressmen, and they would have to decide a plurality of them to go on and cast a vote for one of these candidates. So this is at a point where I feel like Bernie Sanders is completely out of the race because he's just not going to have that support from the establishment Democrat congressman. We saw that with all of the super delegates that didn't go his way back in 2016. He barely got a handful of super delegates of those party insiders from the Democrats. These are the same kind of people that would make up a vast majority of these congressional seats and decisions. So at this point, Bernie Sanders is out of the race. It would just be between Biden and Trump, and that would really tick off a lot of people that voted for Bernie Sanders in these states, but it's just playing politics. At the end of the day, these people that are part of the Democratic Party would go for the Democratic candidate. It just is what it is. And we go over here, and it kind of explains what would happen in this scenario. This is a really outdated map. It shows the ones that would have Congress for each party, and you can see it's overwhelmingly Republican, but we're getting a blue wave here in 2018, which is going to make a lot of these states a bit more competitive. A lot of these toss-up states like Nevada, Colorado, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Maine. I'd be somewhat surprised if they didn't have a majority of Democratic representation. Then also states that had gerrymandering that are now probably going to be having more congressmen that are Democrats and Republican, states like Virginia, as well as Pennsylvania. Maybe even Florida is a bit more competitive. In that scenario, if you take the blue wave into consideration, where a lot of these are going to be becoming more competitive, this map is, like I said, a couple years outdated. You get basically to a situation where it's almost about a 25-25 matchup, and you need 26 of the states to get over the line. So If we have the Republicans taking Alaska, so 1, and then I'm just going to count through these, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. So then that's it, with them losing every toss-up state, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and even like a Montana where Gianforte's down in the polling right now as the Republican. You'd get very close to a 25-25 situation, but even in that rosy scenario for the Democrats, you're probably in a situation where more likely the Republicans would have 26 votes in comparison to the Democrats having 26 votes. But just for the sake of argument, let's say it's a 25-25 tie. Where would that go? So next it would go over to the Senate, and the Senate would decide. Coming into 2018, it looks like it's going to be very close. It could end up being about a 50-50 scenario, possibly once we get through these Senate elections in 2018. So what would happen if it's a 50-50 tie in the Senate? Then it would go over and the vice president would make the decision. That would be Mike Pence. He would cast the ballot and Donald Trump would become president at the end of the day. So if neither of these three candidates were able to win the 270 electoral votes, the Congress situation would benefit Trump more than likely. And if that wasn't the case, it would go over to the Senate, which would be very close. Maybe it has just enough Democrats where you could get him over the line, but in a tied situation, you'd have Trump as well in that scenario. So I just wanted to talk through how this would play itself out if we had three candidates going head-to-head going into the 2020 presidential election. Thought it would be kind of interesting to see and talk through how the Electoral College might play itself out. I could be way off with these predictions. I could have Biden maybe winning a lot of these states where I'm giving Sanders more credit. Maybe it's the flip scenario where Sanders is able to win some of these Democratic states that I had Biden going with. But Trump, he's going to have a great scenario if you have two candidates that are on the Democrat and independent progressive side splitting more of that vote, then you would have the Republican vote split. So he would definitely benefit in that scenario. So thanks guys for stopping on in. I thought this was a really interesting concept because you never have a three-horse race, it seems, in these presidential elections in the United States. Probably going to continue to be a two-horse race going forward. But if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Check out all of our election prediction videos over on our YouTube channel. Subscribe for more, and we hope to see you guys back here for future videos. Bye.